when it comes to user groups and privileges, you'll be pleased to hear that I've enabled the admin account. I've created a secondary fake admin account that's got all of the powers, and I've created a guest account with more powers than God. So at the moment, this system has pretty much the worst policies you can imagine. Hello and welcome back, and that is right, today we're going to do quite an unusual video here at NAScompares. We do extol the virtues of security when it comes to data, when it comes to your router, your switch, but today we're going to take things in a very different direction, because today we're going to put a couple of NASes and a router in the most unsafe state we can. We are going to go for the doomsday scenario. Have you ever left your house and wondered, oh wait, did I leave my keys at home? Did I leave the door unlocked? Those sort of feelings. I left the hairdryer on. Today we're going to open the doors, we're going to open the windows, we're going to leave the keys on the mat. We are going to put these devices in the most insecure state possible so you don't have to. And then I'm going to bugger off to Edinburgh. I'm going to go away to the Edinburgh Fringe for 5 days. It's going to be lovely. And when I come back, we're going to look at these NAS systems that we've set up in the most insecure fashion we could, just to see what is going to happen. Ed, how do you think this experiment is going to go? Top of your head.
I think I've left keys a couple of times at home and nothing was stolen. So I guess in just a few days, there's nothing going to be damaged or stolen or, you know, encrypted.
Absolutely. I mean, let's face it, it all comes down to opportunism, and it comes down to people that are scanning the local area network in, you know, an office state, or let's be realistic, people that are intruding from afar over the internet. We are talking DDoS, we are talking remote SSH and into the back of your system. So, without further ado, let's really crack straight on with just how we're going to absolutely knacker this network environment. So we've logged into a network, a router here. On this network right now, we only have technically 4 devices. We've got the router, we've got 2 NASes, one Synology, one QNAP, and we have this laptop, which I'm going to take with me to Edinburgh. Lovely stuff. So the first thing we did immediately is we put on DMZ. For those who aren't aware, demilitarized zone is effectively one of the ways in which you can make your router an absolute open door policy. We've not restricted any protocols. We've set this up to be comically easy to access. On top of that, again, we will be monitoring the logs on this device later on, and as you can see, we've already enabled quite a lot of dangerous stuff there in the interim. Now, Eddie, I believe you've got a little security checklist there for us to go through and wildly ignore.
Yeah, earlier I made a list of things I would secure in my NAS to keep things safe. So we might do something quite opposite and go through the list and...
So let's go through it. Wink. Let's go. What's some of the things on your list?
Oh, the first thing is obviously password. Never do a password blank.
Good news.
Or password or admin.
Good news for you. I've set the password on this router. Let's log out. So the password on this router, you'll be pleased to hear, is the word password. And the password for this router is the word password. So our router login for the administrative powers is admin and password. What's next on the checklist?
If you have something called auto block, so if someone is trying to guess the password and fails a couple of times, they would be banned for a day or longer. Is there such a feature like that?
I've disabled all protocols relating to attack prevention. They are all turned off. Every single one of them has been turned off. People can take as many stabs at this router as they'd like.
Maybe you have something like two-step authentication. You could disable that.
Nope, no two-step authentication. It is supported on this router along with an authenticator app, both of which I've thrown out the window. Next.
Next would be disabling admin account, but and create a separate account for users. But you already
done the opposite. I've enabled the guest account with no password, and I've enabled the admin account and given it all the powers in the universe. Next.
Could be creating another accounts that are not called admin, like Grubby, unique names, so something what wouldn't be found in a library of names. So you could create actually a guest account, because that should be disabled.
Yep. So we've created a guest account and given that account superpowers.
So remove apps you don't use.
I've not added any apps onto this, but I've also allowed SSH access and non-encrypted Telnet access to this router. I've also enabled pretty much anything and anything goes on this. Oh, and just to confirm, it is a non-secure network connection as well.
So yeah, and also disabling all services. So you mentioned SSH and things like that. So
well, I've allowed custom script to be used on the router remotely. I've allowed administrative privileges to be enabled. LEDs I've left on because I thought they'll look pretty, but I have disabled all audio notifications in the surrounding environment there. I've ignored the setup wizard in its entirety, and I think for now that's put my router in possibly one of the worst states it could possibly be in. Oh, and of course I have enabled remote UPnP, you'll be pleased to hear. So again, all of that's on there. I've not enabled secure mode, I've not enabled additional logging, again with no restrictions to any remote user connecting with this system. So that's how our router is set up, ladies and gentlemen. It is the barn doors are wide open. Why don't we make our way over to the couple of NASes? So first up, we're going to look at this QNAP here. Now the QNAP at the moment is currently in the process of transferring some files over. I've popped over some photo albums. I thought, you know what, I love me some photo albums. The last thing I want is someone getting in and doing something with them. Unfortunately, I'm running a QNAP on a very old firmware. So that's the first thing, I'm running an old firmware. I have not, if we go to the options menu here, I have not enabled two-step verification. The password settings, I've created this account to have no password whatsoever. On top of that, there's no email login, SSH keys. I've not generated any, but I'm not going to need to. If we head over into the control panel here, you'll be able to see that we are running an older version of QTS. It's still QTS 5, but it's not QTS 5.1. And if we make our way into the security section, we can give ourselves a good old laugh. I'm going to enable all connections. IP access protection, I've got absolutely no auto block all the way through. Access protection, absolutely no restrictions anywhere. And the password policy is what I'd like to describe as comical. On top of that, when we make our way along into network and file processes here, you'll be pleased to hear that when it comes to Telnet, we make our way into Telnet there, I've enabled all of it and allowed as much full access as possible to the NAS there. I've also enabled UPnP just to be on the safe side as well. When it comes to user groups and privileges, you'll be pleased to hear that I've enabled the admin account. I've created a secondary fake admin account that's got all of the powers, and I've created a guest account with more powers than God. So at the moment, this system has pretty much the worst policies you can imagine. Right now, it is pretty much good to go with all of the different services that I've enabled on there. All of the different service discovery portals have been turned on. Everything is on there with no limitations to the number of attempts, and all passwords, I should confirm, are just the word password. So I would argue this is one of the worst states we could have put this QNAP NAS into. If we make our way over to the Synology, and again, ignore the fact it says the connection is unstable, because let's face it, we know it's unstable. We can make our way over to the Synology. Now again, the Synology is using DSM 7.1, not DSM 7.2. If we make our way over to Telnet and SSH, shockingly, it's all been left on. When we go to the user groups, again, once again, what have we enabled? We have enabled the admin account, a guest account, and a fake admin account, all of which have got superpowers, no two-step authentication, and you'll be even pleased to hear that I've given the guest user super admin powers thanks to the delegation mode built into this system. On top of that, in terms of file processes, you name it, I've turned it on. Every single thing you can think of, I've just slammed them on with no password restrictions whatsoever. And I am aware some of those are local processes and some of the others are restricted to certain apps and processes that need them, but still nevertheless, not only have we not created any kinds of two-step authentication and absolutely no means of securely barring ourselves from general access, and certainly no auto block anywhere along the way. To move that along the personal accounts. But ultimately, what we've created here are two NASes that have got absolutely no real means to stop someone getting in. I have now opened the doors to the internet. So once again, Eddie, after everything I've showed you, how do you think this is going to end?
I want to double check if you have opened those ports on your router for Synology 5000 port, 5001, and port 80 and 8080 for the QNAP.
That's a good point. I have set up the NAS here to have those. Let's go into it there. Right, let's head over to the router there. Let's have a quick look. And we need the DMC, don't we? Port forward in. So have a quick look, and boom, there we go. We've opened up the port for QTS and DSM on both of them at 8080 and 5000 respectively, as you can see there at the top, everyone. And then on top of that, of course, we have opened up the SSH there as well on port 22 for both of them. So if we go in and just double check that those ports are indeed correct. Let's go in and make sure those are correct. SSH. Going in on port 22, and in the case of the Synology, port 22. So,
and also, have you enabled QuickConnect and Cloud ID for QNAP?
I have not enabled those processes. I've made sure that all connections with the device are directly through the router. Again, I could have used the remote access one for Synology and QNAP, but I've decided I'm just going to leave these without those remote connections, because I think a lot of users think as long as they don't use those services that their systems are somehow protected. So I've not utilized proprietary remote access credentials. This is just utilizing open doors on the routers and the NAS for now. But apart from that, I would say I've put these systems in a, frankly, comedically unsafe state. Would you agree with that, Ed?
Yeah, as long as also firewalls are closed, antiviruses are disabled.
Yep, there are no firewalls enabled, no router, or no antivirus is in place. There's no anti-malware in place. There's no anti-ransomware encryption, and again, just for good measure, I've made sure that there's absolutely no write once, read many, no encryption there on the shared volumes. There's no shared folders with encryption there. There's no snapshots. There is no recovery. Both of these systems are both running on a single drive each. So any of the data I've put on these, which by the way is a bunch of photos in the case of both of them, that data is going to be lost if an interloper gets in and attacks this device. So as you can see, we've got the current list of events here on screen. So if we looked at connection events there, that is where we can see the current list of connected events. And if there are failures, we'll know. But for now, I think what we're going to do is I am going to knack off to Edinburgh now and have a lovely time, hopefully, touch wood, at the Edinburgh Fringe. Ed, I hope you have a lovely few days. You're in charge of NAScompares now, so look after it, feed it nicely.
I'll go and check those cat videos you put on those NASes.
You take care of the whole thing, and what we'll do is we're both going to come back here in around 5 to 6 days to see just what happened, because right now, we don't know. For you, it's going to be less than 30 seconds until you know how this ends. But for me and Ed, we haven't got a clue. So let's fast forward about 5 or 6 days and find out just how this went. And welcome back. It's been a bunch of days. I had a lovely time. Thanks for asking. And I think what we all want to know is what happened with the NASes and the routers. Did it all get kiboshed? Did it get attacked all to buggery? And nothing happened. Now, I don't want the big takeaway for this video to be there's no point having network security, there's no point having internet security, because clearly nothing happens. That is not the takeaway from this. And frankly, I still believe, I am astounded, in fact, that I was not attacked on these NASes. I'm surprised the router wasn't even intercepted. But we're still going to go through the logs, because even during the course of this experiment, a few things did actually emerge to me about this. Now, again, if you're watching this video and you're thinking, I missed something, or I didn't leave a particular bunch of other windows open, perhaps publishing the IP in a bunch of places online, or the remote IP, I could have done that. And again, maybe we'll do a follow-up to this video if we get enough suggestions below on ways that we could have opened the door to this online. I don't believe publishing it online, that would have come under the heading of intentional kind of overt negligence, but let's carry on with everything we found. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is the router. Now, as you can see, the router was still running, and if we go into the logs for the router and we look at the events logs, it does break down into a bunch of different events and parameters there. I'm just going to make sure my big head isn't in the way here while we're doing this, and just minimize that, because I will feel a bit bad for the sheer arrogance of my head being why we can't see statistics. But as we can see there, the events. Now, I think it's important. There's a couple of things that I did, and throughout the course of this, I did this with all three systems. I intentionally logged in with a poor password. And what I meant by that is I put the wrong password credentials in. And as you can see, it did log the attempt. It logged the attempt earlier on the 10th. And again, that was about an hour ago, just shy of an hour ago, where I did that and that IP block. So the block was still in effect on that system. I've not turned my phone off, can you tell? But if we look into the history of this device, since the 4th, when we set the device up, we can see that there was continued connections with the SIM router we put inside because we didn't want to use our dedicated connection there. But as we can see, right up to the point when my system arrived here in the office and this laptop hopped back on to the Wi-Fi, there wasn't really anything going on. We can go through those logs there. We can go into the next page. And again, we're on to the 7th now of August, and all we saw was just a little alert occasionally where the SIM router dropped its connection. Not unusual when it comes to SIM routers. And if we carry on, we've gone into the 5th now, and we're still not seeing anything going on there. We'll make our way into the next day. We're back onto the 4th. This is just when we left all of those changes and implemented security faux pas that we ran into there. All of that being done along with changing all of those configurations and open up all of those ports. And ultimately, you can see that when I left the office there with my Wi-Fi client leaving the office, so I left it, nothing really happened on the router side. Now, if we move up, we go into the general events. There's not really anything to report. In the general events, all we saw was, again, all of those changes that we implemented on the 4th of August. Moving on to system events, the router itself made requests early on with the firmware update, but again, we didn't allow that later firmware update revision to be used then. Again, on the 4th, the day we left. Next up, we've got network events. This is where I hoped, oh, I don't know about hoped, that's a bit mean, but I thought this is where we might see any kind of serious implemented changes. And again, that's the ones that we've gone through there, and not really anything to write home about. So there's not really anything we didn't miss in the all events calendar. And again, there's no change there. There's the 4th when we left, and boom, straight there into the 10th. So unsurprisingly, there were no real affected changes on the NASes. Now, there is an argument that if I'd use a much less rigorous router, if I'd used a router that was incredibly basic, we might have seen a change. And if I do another alternative to this video, or we try this again, we will go for a much more domestic, maybe a standard class ISP free router there. But if we make our way into the Synology and QNAP, now I've logged in. Now, full disclosure, before the start of this video, something I will go into more detail later, I've actually already logged into these systems to do a check. I should have had OBS recording, and again, that will become clear why later on. But for now, we can see we've logged in like normal. It's telling us to install the apps, and we intentionally made a point of not using the latest firmware and not using any extra apps. It was meant to be a default state and easy access to the data. Now, as you can see, there's the complaint we would have expected, again, talking about the admin account being on. And again, when we were enabling a lot of the kind of remote access protocol and standard file protocol, you can see that they have all indeed highlighted that, you know, you shouldn't really have had those things, and it's disabled some along the way. Now, if we go to the log center there, we can see that it's recommending we use the fully featured log there, which is going to go ahead and change those down. And it's still asking us to disable that AFP. But as you can see down there, there is our logs at the bottom. And again, there's the 4th when we left. Move into there, open it up. There's the 4th. And again, as you can see, nothing really happened. There's the 10th, there's a transition. And straight away from me leaving and the USB drive being disconnected there, absolutely fine. And we just didn't see any meaningful impact there, at least in far as the traditional logs. Now, if we dig a little deeper into the logs there, we can find out a little bit more about the system stuff that was happening in the background of this device. And again, as far as system protocol and internal recognition happening was, if we move to connections, again, nothing happened there in the interim. We moved to the file transfers, nothing happened in the interim, obviously, and drives, nothing was connected. So overall, the Synology, nothing happened, and get used to hearing that. Now, if we move over to the QNAP side, I've already logged in. And now, as you can see there at the bottom, now it's reappeared. Now, I'm going to have to disable my camera just for a second here, because this is something I didn't know would happen. At the bottom, you can see the system is now The system is being updated now. Please do not shut down or restart the system. Now, the reason that's important is I did not set that. I've logged in with an admin, and this is something that happened prior to me logging in. So if we go into the logs there, so we move in and to find out a bit more information in the system about what's happened in the interim, and we make our way into, where is it, the log center there. Is it system status? Let's have a look. I had it on screen earlier on when we make our way in. Apologies if you're already seeing it and you're screaming it because it's there on screen and you can see it and I can't. Oh, there you go. I just had to go up there, click the bell and click more, and it opened up the system logs. Again, there is a more detailed notification center that I could have used, but I wanted to use default tools there. But we're looking at all security levels here, and I'm going to max screen this, so I've removed me. But again, just taking a look there at the bottom, that thing to do with the system being updated, I did not set the system to do updates, and I'm not going to click firmware updates for reasons that will become clear in a moment. But when I logged in here, we can see there is the logins there, there's the fourth, and no gap there in between. The drive left, just like we saw on the Synology, all of the settings we implemented, nothing changed there. Now if we go into the system connections, again, system connections, things are absolutely fine there. We make our way into online users, system client, syslog I should say, they're in the background. Again, all fairly standard stuff. But what you may have noticed is network virtual switch disconnected, network adapter disconnected. The reason for that was, just before I started recording, I arrived here in the studio, and obviously I was looking forward to seeing the impact of this experiment. So I logged into the QNAP, and after I'd looked at it and seen that nothing really had gone in, no secure issues there, and I did like a failed login attempt to see that it would register, that message at the bottom appeared for me. And in my head I was kind of, I don't remember setting auto updates to kick in. And again, maybe in the I'll check my original recordings and find out. And when I went into the control panel, the following happened. I went into, as you would expect, firmware update to see what would happen. And I clicked firmware update. And as you can see here, the system immediately started updating that firmware. Now, again, we'll put me back here on screen so you can see me. But I'm not sure how I feel about that firmware automatically installing. Now, on the one hand, having a firmware update automatically is a setting that you can set. You can choose to have that. And as you can see, I have set it up to automatically check if a new version is available when logging into the NAS web administration interface. So I have done that. I have set the system to check for that firmware when I log in, but I don't recall having the system auto updating. I can't check right now because it's doing that. There's no way for me to get into that window because every time I go in to the firmware update area, it's automatically downloading. It's stopping me using the rest of the system. Again, if I refresh, I'll be able to log back into the system, and then from there we can have a little look and see if it will allow us to do so. But by the looks of things, that auto update trigger I think might annoy some users. I don't think it's bad. I do not think it's bad that it auto updates, because some users are going to quite like that if they don't have the latest firmware to avoid it. But if we go back in, we go into the firmware update settings, and as you can see, it's not allowing us to do it. Now, the reason earlier on that you saw me disconnect that network adaptation was because disconnecting the network adapter stops this process. You disconnect it, and then you reconnect it, and you can go into the QNAP NAS and have a little look. But nonetheless, it would still go into this firmware update. So presumably is an auto update setting by default, but I don't remember setting that up. But let's head back. So on the one hand, I think it would be very easy for users to watch this video and go, what's the problem? It's fantastic. You had your system running in the most unsafe state. You had all the auto blocks on the NASes disabled. You had your router set to DMZ. You disabled all of any kind of anti-DDoS attack software architecture. The NASes had the admin account on with the lowest possible passwords and most repeatable known passwords out there that I think even a child could find my password in 5 attempts. We had the systems running with absolutely no secure protocol to prevent access. We opened up the ports in the router specific to both of these brands. So ultimately, some users may watch this video and go, oh, it's absolutely fine. I've got nothing to worry about. That should not be the takeaway for this video. The main takeaway for this video should be about the difference between targeted attacks and random attacks, and vulnerabilities related to apps rather than vulnerabilities related to the actual OS system. Because in the past, when we have seen vulnerabilities appear on a lot of these platforms, a number of them, and by a number of them I mean a huge variety, a huge percentage of them, have been pertaining to specific apps and vulnerabilities in them, be they hard-coded, and you know I'm looking at you, QNAP, a couple of years ago, or in some cases just vulnerabilities inherent to Linux, which Linux themselves patch and then the NAS brands follow up on. So again, this has been a test of me running the baseline, the very basic level of this NAS with none of those extra applications running in the background. And if I had installed those apps, they'd be the newer versions of those apps. So again, this is not representative of a day-to-day environment. You should not use this video as some kind of confirmation that you should take your foot off the gas when it comes to security. But also, if you are watching this video and perhaps you've got suggestions when we redo this process on how to make things even less safe, but bear in mind that we still want to stay within the realms of realistic setup, do let me know, and maybe we'll do a reattempt at this video very, very soon. But for now, although I'm technically pleased these NASs haven't been impacted, I still don't think that is anywhere near the kind of evidence that any user should take on board that it's fine to run their system in even one of many of the ways that I've utilised this system setup. But thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry if it seemed like a damp squib ending and you wanted to see a NAS in flames. Again, I think that says more about you than me. But do let me know what you guys think in the comments. And again, please present those suggestions on if and when we do a reattempt at this, ways to make it even less safe. And again, keep it realistic. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.